Bullies humiliated the new teacher, not knowing he was an elite hitman undercover. Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened. The new English teacher, Mr. Arthur Finch, arrived at Northwood High School mid-semester, a blank slate in a place where everyone had a story etched into the worn linoleum floors and graffiti-scarred desks. He was a quiet man, almost to the point of invisibility. His clothes were neat but unremarkable, his movements precise but understated. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, even murmur, easily lost in the boisterous chaos of a high school classroom. He seemed, to the casual observer, utterly unremarkable. Northwood High itself was a crumbling empire, ruled not by its overwhelmed principal, Mr. Harrison, but by a different kind of monarchy. Their sovereign was Kevin, the football team's star quarterback, a scion of wealth and privilege who wielded arrogance like a blunt instrument. His queen was Brenda, an ice-cold beauty who commanded loyalty through digital manipulation and whispered threats. Their enforcer, Marcus, was a hulking, silent presence, a shadow who moved at Kevin and Brenda's bidding, his physical intimidation a constant, unspoken threat. Mr. Finch's first week was a slow, agonizing slide into their crosshairs. His attempts at classroom management, rooted in patience and understanding, were met with dismissive smirks and veiled defiance. He'd ask Kevin to put away his phone, and Kevin would simply slide it under his desk, his eyes flicking up with a challenge that Finch, seemingly, failed to register. Brenda would ostentatiously whisper with her clique, her laughter echoing unervingly as Finch tried to explain Shakespeare. Marcus would sit in the back, his powerful frame slumped, his gaze a silent, unsettling weight on anyone who dared to engage with the new teacher. Sarah, a quiet, observant girl in the front row, noticed it all. She saw the subtle disrespect, the calculated insubordination. She also noticed something else about Mr. Finch, the unnatural stillness in his eyes, the way he seemed to absorb everything without reacting, like a deep, placid lake hiding unimaginable depths. Principal Harrison was no help, a man whose posture mirrored the slump of the school budget. He was more concerned with avoiding conflict than with addressing it. He'd offer Finch platitudes about building rapport and understanding student dynamics, subtly implying that the teacher himself was the problem. The school had always operated under a veneer of order, but beneath it simmered a stew of fear and silent resentment, especially among the students who weren't part of Kevin and Brenda's inner circle. They watched Finch with a mixture of pity and a grim, knowing expectation of his inevitable downfall. The tipping point arrived on a Tuesday during fourth period English. Finch was attempting to lead a discussion on character development, his voice earnest. Kevin, bored and restless, loudly began mimicking Finch's gentle cadence, exaggerating his slight hesitation, turning his thoughtful pauses into stuttering mockery. Brenda, ever the architect of public humiliation, pulled out her phone, its camera lens glinting, and began openly filming. The rest of the class, caught between fear of Kevin and the nervous energy of the moment, either snickered or looked away, their discomfort palpable. Marcus, positioned by the door, simply watched, a faint, cruel smile on his lips. Finch, standing at the front of the classroom, paused. The mockery hung in the air, thick and humiliating. He looked from Kevin's sneering face to Brenda's camera, then to the embarrassed faces of the other students. He seemed, to everyone, utterly defeated. His shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping to his notes. The classroom filled with snickers and a few outright laughs. The incident was short, brutal, and to all appearances, a decisive victory for the bullies. Mr. Finch, the quiet, unassuming new teacher, had been publicly humbled. Sarah watched, her heart aching for him. But she also saw something else, something only she seemed to catch. Just for a fraction of a second, as Finch's gaze dropped, his eyes had flickered, a movement so swift and subtle it was almost imperceptible. A flash of something cold and utterly lethal, gone as quickly as it appeared, like a predator briefly glimpsing its prey before resuming its camouflage. It was a detail that would haunt her, a single, unsettling note in the symphony of his apparent defeat, hinting at a truth far darker and more dangerous than any of them could possibly imagine. The performance was flawless. The classroom humiliation was not an isolated incident. It was an open declaration of war, and Kevin, Brenda, and Marcus waged it with merciless precision. Their victory in fourth period had emboldened them, confirming their belief that Mr. Finch was a weak, vulnerable target, a toy to be played with until he broke. Their actions escalated from mockery to active sabotage. Finch would arrive in his classroom to find his carefully organized teaching materials glued shut, his textbooks defaced with crude caricatures of his face, or his whiteboard covered in insulting slogans. They spread vicious, fabricated rumors about his past, whispered just loud enough for other students to hear, casting him as a pathetic figure, a failure who couldn't hack it anywhere else. During class, their defiance grew more overt. Kevin would brazenly check his phone, sometimes even answering calls right in front of Finch. Brenda would organize flash mobs of silent, mocking stares, her cliques synchronizing their movements to make Finch feel like he was performing for an utterly contemptuous audience. Marcus would block the door when students tried to leave for the restroom, subtly flexing his bulk, ensuring no one dared to defy the unspoken rules of their reign. Finch tried every conventional teaching method in his arsenal. He attempted one-on-one conversations, appealing to their maturity and respect for learning. He issued warnings, gave detentions, and referred them to Principal Harrison. But each effort only seemed to fuel their contempt. They saw his attempts at civility as weakness, his adherence to rules as desperation. His patience, rather than de-escalating the conflict, seemed to convince them they had an unlimited license for cruelty. Principal Harrison, true to form, offered no real support. When Finch presented evidence of the vandalism or insubordination, Harrison would sigh heavily, run a hand over his thinning hair, and lament the challenges of the modern educational environment. He'd suggest that Finch needed to be more assertive or connect with the students on their level, subtly shifting the blame onto the victim. Harrison was more concerned with maintaining a false sense of peace, a facade of order that masked the rot beneath. He feared Kevin's powerful family, Brenda's well-connected father, and Marcus's volatile temper. He saw Finch as a disposable problem, a sacrificial lamb on the altar of administrative convenience. Sarah, watching from the periphery, felt a growing sense of dread. She tried to help Finch in small ways, erasing a defaced whiteboard when no one was looking, discreetly leaving him a note about a rumor, but she was terrified to directly confront the bullies. She knew their power, the way they could make life a living hell for anyone who crossed them. Yet, as she observed Finch, she still saw that unnerving calm, the quiet intensity in his eyes. He moved with a strange, almost imperceptible grace, avoiding obstacles with a fluid precision that seemed out of place for a mild-mannered teacher. He never seemed truly surprised or flustered, only outwardly disappointed. It was as if he was playing a part, performing a role of vulnerability. The climactic humiliation arrived during a school assembly. Kevin, with Brenda's meticulous planning, had rigged a projector to flash a photoshopped image of Finch in a ridiculous outfit, accompanied by a booming, distorted audio clip of his voice during Principal Harrison's welcoming remarks. The entire student body erupted in laughter, a wave of cruel amusement that washed over the auditorium. Finch, seated stoically on the stage among the other teachers, was the unwilling center of attention. Brenda filmed it all on her phone, her face alight with malicious glee. Marcus, positioned near the stage, actively blocked any teachers who tried to intervene. For a moment, it seemed as if Finch had finally broken. His posture stiffened, his hands clenching under the table. But then, as quickly as it came, the flicker of raw emotion vanished. He simply sat there, absorbing the humiliation, his face unreadable. He seemed defeated, a man who had lost control, not just of his classroom, but of his own dignity. The incident solidified the bully's power, making it clear to the entire school that Mr. Finch was fair game, utterly powerless. But as the laughter subsided, Sarah, watching from the front row, couldn't shake the memory of that almost imperceptible flicker in Finch's eyes, the way his jaw had clenched just so, the unnatural stillness that had settled over him. It wasn't the stillness of defeat, she realized with a shiver. It was the stillness of a coiled spring, held in check by an invisible, immense force. It was the stillness of a predator waiting for its moment to strike. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that they had pushed Mr. Finch too far, and that the man they thought they had broken was something else entirely. The humiliation at the assembly reverberated through Northwood High like a discordant echo. The school buzzed with whispers, not just among the students, but even among the teachers. Most faculty members, weary and resigned, saw it as confirmation of Finch's inadequacy. He was too soft, too gentle, too unsuited for the brutal realities of their troubled institution. Even a few, who had initially harbored sympathy, now shook their heads, convinced he was a lost cause. Principal Harrison, fueled by his own fear and a desperate need to maintain some semblance of control, called Finch into his office the next morning. The principal's office, usually a bastion of bureaucratic order, felt more like a cage, the air heavy with Harrison's barely suppressed panic. "Mr. Finch," Harrison began, his voice thin and reedy, "I regret to inform you that this situation is no longer tenable. Your classroom management is, frankly, unacceptable. The incident at the assembly, it was a disaster. It reflects poorly on the entire school. And on me." He wrung his hands, avoiding Finch's gaze. "I'm going to have to insist, Mr. Finch. You get control of that class. You reestablish order. If there is another incident of this magnitude, or if these students continue to operate with such impunity, I will have no choice but to recommend disciplinary action, up to and including the termination of your contract. Do you understand?" The ultimatum hung in the air, a sword of Damocles dangling precariously over Finch's head. It put him in an impossible position: retaliate conventionally and risk blowing his meticulously crafted cover, or fail and lose the only safe haven he had found. Finch simply nodded, his face impassive. "I understand, Mr. Harrison." He left the office, the door closing softly behind him, the sound strangely conclusive. That evening, as the last of the school lights winked out and the building settled into its nightly slumber, Mr. Finch drove his unassuming sedan to his quiet, sparsely furnished apartment on the outskirts of town. The moment he stepped through his door, the persona of the mild-mannered English teacher slipped away like a discarded skin. The apartment, though outwardly modest, was a meticulously organized space, every object having its precise place. He moved with a quiet intensity, his hands methodically removing his tie, unbuttoning his shirt. Beneath the layers of ordinary clothing, his body was a testament to years of rigorous training, lean, powerful, every muscle defined. He shed his discomfort in the classroom, replacing it with a fluid, lethal grace. He moved to the center of his living room, now a makeshift dojo. A silent ritual began. He executed a series of martial arts forms, each movement precise, economical, and devastatingly effective. His hands became blurs of motion, striking unseen targets with a force that would shatter bone. His feet moved with a balletic deadliness, sweeping, kicking, balancing on an edge of control that most people would never comprehend. He then moved to a hidden compartment behind a false bookshelf. He opened it, revealing a collection of specialized equipment. Not weapons, not yet, but tools of a different trade. Digital scanners, signal jammers, a sophisticated comms array, and a discreet, high-resolution surveillance camera. He moved with the focused concentration of a surgeon, his fingers flying over keyboards, his eyes scanning screens filled with complex data. This was his true self. This was Arthur Finch, former highly decorated Black Ops operative, now living under a deep cover identity in the Federal Witness Protection Program. His teacher persona was his carefully constructed shield, his last chance at a normal life after a deep cover mission went sideways, forcing him to disappear from the world he once inhabited. He had chosen teaching, of all things, because he craved the quiet immersion, the predictable rhythm, the chance to simply be without the constant threat of violence or betrayal. But the bullies had breached his sanctuary. Their actions, once mere annoyances, had escalated into a direct threat to his peace, to his very existence. They were not just disrupting his classroom, they were drawing attention to him, threatening the fragile stability of his cover. The memory of Kevin's mocking face, Brenda's cold amusement, Marcus's looming menace, they were not just insults, they were a violation. His trained instinct screamed for a decisive, surgical response. Every fiber of his being, honed by years of surviving impossible situations, yearned to eliminate the threat. But he couldn't, not conventionally. His life depended on remaining hidden, on maintaining the illusion of Arthur Finch, the meek English teacher. Yet, the line had been crossed. Their petty cruelty was no longer just about humiliation. It was about the dangerous attention they brought. He knew he had to deal with them, to dismantle their power structure, but he had to do it discreetly, effectively, and without revealing the true extent of his capabilities. The stakes had just been irrevocably raised. His life, and the fragile peace he had fought so hard to find, now depended on his ability to blend his two worlds, the ordinary and the extraordinary, into a single, devastatingly effective response. The decision was made. The quiet teacher was gone, replaced by the predator, now stirring from its long, enforced slumber. Arthur Finch was a man who understood patience. Years of deep cover operations had taught him that the quickest, most direct path wasn't always the most effective. Sometimes the most devastating strike was the one that was meticulously planned, executed from the shadows, dismantling an enemy piece by piece until they collapsed under their own weight. The bullies at Northwood High were no longer just a classroom problem. They were a threat to his sanctuary, and threats, in his line of work, were dealt with. But not with a heavy hand, not with overt force. He would become the ghost they never saw, the whisper they never heard, dismantling their power from within. He started with Kevin. Finch knew that the young quarterback, despite his bravado, was a creature of habit, predictable in his arrogance. Instead of confronting him, Finch began to observe. After school, Finch wouldn't just go home. He'd subtly follow Kevin, staying far enough back to be unseen, yet close enough to gather intelligence. He moved with a practiced fluidity that spoke of years of honed surveillance skills, blending into the background of the small town, an invisible shadow. He observed Kevin's after-school routine. Not football practice, not studying, but frequent, clandestine meetings behind a deserted hardware store on the edge of town. Kevin would meet with older, rougher men who exuded an aura of quiet menace. Finch, using a discreet parabolic microphone, captured snippets of their conversations. He quickly realized this wasn't just a rich kid gambling. This was a sophisticated, high-stakes operation. Kevin was not just a player. He was a runner, collecting payments, delivering messages, acting as an intermediary for a local loan shark operation. The revelation sent a cold wave through Finch. This wasn't petty bullying. This was organized crime infiltrating the school, using its students. This elevated the stakes dramatically. This wasn't about a teacher getting his classroom back. It was about protecting vulnerable students, about exposing a dangerous criminal element deeply embedded in the community. Next, he turned his attention to Brenda. Her primary weapon was digital manipulation. Her influence spread through social media. Finch, with a skill set that far surpassed the school's IT department, began to discreetly monitor her online activity. He didn't hack. He observed, analyzing her public and semi-private posts, cross-referencing information, looking for patterns. He discovered that Brenda wasn't just spreading rumors for fun. She was using her network to identify students with financial troubles, feeding their names and vulnerabilities to Kevin, who would then introduce them to the loan shark. She also meticulously controlled the narrative around any school incident, burying information that might incriminate her clique, creating digital smokescreens. Finch even uncovered whispers of Brenda's father, a seemingly respectable local businessman, having ties to the loan shark, explaining her untouchable status. Finally, Marcus, the enforcer. Finch observed his interactions, his silent loyalty to Kevin. He noticed the bruises on Marcus's knuckles, not from football, but from fighting. He saw the way Marcus flinched when Kevin snapped, the subtle signs of a deeper, more troubling dynamic. Finch recognized the pattern of abuse, of a young man trapped in a cycle of violence, exploited for his physical prowess. Marcus was a victim as much as he was a perpetrator, but no less dangerous. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a disturbing mosaic. The schoolyard bullying wasn't isolated acts of teenage cruelty. It was a symptom, a visible manifestation of a deeper, insidious disease. The loan shark operation was using Northwood High as a recruiting ground, preying on vulnerable students and extending its tendrils into the community, possibly corrupting local officials. Finch knew now that this wasn't just about his job. This was about justice. This was about protecting the students, about exposing the rot at the heart of their seemingly quiet town. He began to compile his findings, a comprehensive dossier of evidence. Dates, times, names, locations, financial transactions, digitally captured conversations. He worked meticulously, silently, driven by a cold, unwavering purpose. The mild-mannered English teacher was a ghost in the machine, and he was about to make the machine grind to a halt. The game was no longer being played by the bully's rules. It was being played by his. The deeper Arthur Finch delved, the clearer the picture became. Northwood High wasn't just infiltrated, it was compromised. The rot went far deeper than a few troublesome teenagers. It extended into the very administrative structure of the school and bled out into the wider community. This wasn't merely a school problem. It was a criminal enterprise, using the institution as a fertile hunting ground for new victims and a convenient front for illicit activities. Working primarily under the cloak of night, Finch utilized the full spectrum of his specialized operative skills. His apartment, once a place of quiet refuge, became a command center. Digital forensics, surveillance techniques, and tactical planning occupied his every waking hour outside the classroom. He navigated the shadowy corners of the internet, analyzing public records, cross-referencing names, and meticulously piecing together financial trails that seemed designed to be invisible. He discovered that Kevin's gambling operation was indeed merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. The local loan shark, a notoriously elusive figure known only as the serpent on the street, was running a sophisticated racket that preyed on desperate families in the community. Finch found evidence that the serpent was funneling money through various shell corporations, some of which had ties, however tenuous, to school-related funds. This, he realized with a chilling jolt, explained Principal Harrison's spinelessness. Harrison wasn't just incompetent, he was compromised. Whether through direct coercion, blackmail, or a shared, quiet complicity, the principal was caught in the serpent's coils, forced to ignore the blatant corruption under his nose. Finch uncovered a series of suspicious financial transfers from school booster clubs to obscure, non-existent charities, money that then vanished into the serpent's network. This wasn't just about gambling. It was about illicit profit and systemic corruption. Brenda's role, too, became clearer and far more sinister. She wasn't simply a mean girl with a smartphone. Her digital manipulation was a carefully crafted tool for the serpent. She used social media to identify students from struggling families, to gauge their desperation, and then, subtly, to funnel them towards Kevin and the loan shark. She also managed the online smear campaigns against anyone who dared to question the clique's authority or hinted at their darker activities. Finch traced her father's business connections and found direct links to the serpent's legitimate-looking shell companies. She wasn't just protected by her father. She was a willing, active participant in a criminal network, using her privileged position to exploit her peers. Marcus, in contrast, continued to appear as a tragic figure, a blunt instrument wielded by others. Finch observed his movements, his interactions, and saw the signs of true fear beneath the layers of aggression. Marcus was a pawn, manipulated and controlled, his brute force exploited by Kevin and the Serpent. While his actions were undeniably harmful, Finch's professional assessment leaned towards a need for intervention, not just punishment. He was a victim caught in a larger web. The gravity of the situation pressed down on Finch. The entire school, a place meant for nurturing young minds, was being systematically poisoned from within. His teacher cover, meant to provide him anonymity, now placed him at the heart of a burgeoning criminal investigation, one he was conducting entirely on his own. He was walking a tightrope, the mild-mannered persona, a fragile mask over the honed instincts of a man who had dismantled far more dangerous operations. He gathered irrefutable evidence. High-resolution photographs of financial ledgers that linked legitimate school funds to the Serpent's network, discreetly captured audio recordings of Kevin discussing collections and threats, digital footprints that traced Brenda's online manipulation back to specific students she had targeted. He compiled a comprehensive dossier, cross-referenced and meticulously annotated, building an unassailable case that would stand up in any court. The tension was immense. Every interaction with students, every hallway conversation, every faculty meeting felt charged with the hidden knowledge he carried. He was constantly aware of the need to maintain the Arthur Finch facade, even as his operative mind was meticulously planning the downfall of the Serpent and his network. The path was clear now. The time for observation was over. The time for the direct confrontation had arrived. His first target, the compromised principal, Mr. Harrison. He was the weakest link, the gatekeeper who had allowed the rot to spread. And Finch knew, with chilling certainty, that Harrison was about to learn who Arthur Finch truly was. Arthur Finch chose the end of the school day for his confrontation with Principal Harrison. The last bell had rung, the chaotic flood of students had receded, and the hallways had settled into a quiet hum of administrative duties. The timing was deliberate, designed to ensure privacy and to underscore the gravity of the meeting. Finch walked into Harrison's office without knocking, his movements precise, almost predatory. The principal, hunched over a pile of paperwork, looked up, startled. His eyes, usually shifty and evasive, widened slightly as he took in Finch's posture. The mild-mannered English teacher was gone. In his place stood a man whose quiet confidence radiated an unnerving authority, an aura of controlled power that seemed to shrink the office around them. Mr. Harrison, Finch said, his voice low, devoid of its usual gentle lilt. It was flat, declarative, the tone of a man stating incontrovertible facts. We need to talk, and I assure you, this conversation will not be pleasant for either of us. Harrison, unnerved by Finch's uncharacteristic demeanor, stammered. Mr. Finch, I'm quite busy, and I thought we had discussed your classroom issues. I believe I was quite clear about the terms of your continued employment. Finch ignored the thinly veiled threat. He walked to Harrison's desk and, with a deliberate motion, placed a small, innocuous-looking flash drive on the polished wood surface. He then leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk, his gaze locking with Harrison's, forcing the principal to meet his eyes. This isn't about my classroom, Mr. Harrison, Finch stated, his voice a chilling whisper. This is about yours. This is about the rot that has infested this school, a rot that you deliberately or through cowardice have allowed to fester. Harrison's face went pale. He knew. He clearly knew what Finch was referring to. I don't know what you're talking about, he mumbled, trying to bluster, to feign ignorance. I'm a dedicated educator. I serve this community. Don't insult my intelligence, Mr. Harrison. Finch interjected, his voice still quiet, but now laced with a steely edge that brooked no argument. The loan shark operation. The gambling ring run by Kevin. The digital manipulation and recruitment orchestrated by Brenda. The intimidation tactics of Marcus, all facilitated by your inaction, your silence, and worse, your active complicity. He paused, letting the words sink in, watching the fear bloom in Harrison's eyes. I know about the suspicious financial transfers from the Booster Club. I know about your meetings with the Serpent's lieutenants. I know about the threats they made against your family, forcing you to look the other way. I know it all. Harrison's composure completely shattered. He slumped back in his chair, his hands trembling. How? How could you possibly know all this? He whispered, his voice filled with terror. Who are you? Finch gave him a grim smile, devoid of humor. Who I am is irrelevant. What matters is what you do now. You have allowed children to be exploited, families to be ruined, and the very foundation of this school to be corrupted. You have choices, Mr. Harrison. You can continue to protect the serpent and his network and face the full force of federal charges, conspiracy, fraud, endangerment of minors. Your career will be over. Your reputation will be in tatters, and your family will face the consequences of your complicity. He paused, letting the terrifying implications sink in. Or, Finch continued, his voice softening just enough to offer a sliver of hope. You can choose another path. You can cooperate. You can become the witness you should have been all along. You can help me expose this entire operation, root out the corruption, and protect the students you vow to serve. Your cooperation, your complete and utter honesty, could mitigate your involvement. It could offer you a chance at redemption, a chance to truly serve this community. He leaned back slightly, allowing Harrison room to breathe, to think, to make the agonizing choice. This flash drive contains a portion of the evidence I've gathered, enough to put you away for a very long time. But the full dossier, that remains to be seen. The choice, Mr. Harrison, is entirely yours. But choose wisely, because the clock on their operation and on your future is ticking. The power dynamic had been irrevocably shattered. Harrison, the man who held Finch's job in his hands, was now the one cornered, exposed, and utterly at the mercy of the quiet English teacher. He stared at the flash drive, then at Finch, his face a complex mixture of fear, shame, and a desperate, desperate hope. He knew he was looking at the end of his world, or the beginning of a perilous path toward redemption. The mild-mannered Mr. Finch had just delivered the most potent ultimatum of Harrison's life. The silence that followed Finch's ultimatum was thick with the weight of Harrison's fear and the dawning realization of his precarious position. He stared at the flash drive, then at Finch, his face a sickly pale. The bluster, the evasiveness, the thinly veiled threats, all of it had evaporated, leaving behind a man stripped bare, terrified, and finally, profoundly desperate. He was not entirely irredeemable, merely weak, a man who had made a series of increasingly terrible choices out of fear for his family and his own comfortable existence. After what felt like an eternity, but was only a few agonizing minutes, Harrison let out a long, shuddering sigh. It was the sound of a man breaking, but also, perhaps, the sound of a man choosing to salvage what remained of his soul. They threatened my daughter, Harrison whispered, his voice hoarse. They knew where she went to college. They sent me pictures of her, just walking on campus. They said if I said anything, if I didn't cooperate, they'd make sure she disappeared too. The confession, raw and painful, explained everything. Harrison wasn't just complicit. He was a victim of coercion. Finch nodded, his expression softening slightly. He understood the desperate choices people made under such pressure. I understand, Mr. Harrison, he said, his voice gentler now, but still firm. But that doesn't excuse your inaction. It only explains it. Now, you have a chance to make amends, to truly protect your daughter and every other child in this school. He then presented Harrison with a stark choice, one he had been preparing for. You will contact the authorities, the federal authorities, not local. You will give them everything you know, every name, every date, every financial transaction. And I will help you. I will guide you through this, but you must be absolutely transparent. No more secrets, no more lies. Harrison hesitated, the enormity of the task, the danger of betraying the serpent settling over him. But the alternative, complete ruin, continued complicity in the exploitation of children, was far worse. He finally nodded, a single decisive movement. Okay, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Okay, I'll do it. But I don't know who to call. Who will believe me? Finch reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted burner phone. You will call this number. It belongs to a colleague of mine. They will listen. He was referring to Clara Jensen, the young intern from the Bureau of Indian Affairs he had contacted during the Elias Vance case. He had built a small, trusted network of contacts in his previous life, and while he maintained distance to protect his cover, he knew who would respond to a call for true justice. Over the next few days, Finch and Harrison worked in a clandestine alliance. Harrison, terrified but resolute, provided Finch with access to internal school records, student files that had been flagged by Brenda, and a hidden ledger detailing suspicious payments and disbursements. Finch, using his advanced analytical skills, quickly cross-referenced the information, building an unassailable mountain of evidence that corroborated his earlier findings. He coached Harrison on how to present his testimony, how to avoid revealing Finch's true identity, framing it as Harrison's own deep dive into the school's finances after the initial bullying incidents. The covert operation gathered momentum. Clara Jensen, now a junior analyst and a much more seasoned professional, took Harrison's initial call with cautious optimism. She recognized Finch's subtle hand in the detailed, structured information. The sheer volume and specificity of the evidence, coupled with Harrison's high-level corroboration, bypassed the usual bureaucratic inertia. The federal agents, this time from a specialized organized crime task force, took the case seriously. A covert operation was quickly set in motion, with federal agents moving into Northwood, blending into the community, gathering their own corroborating evidence. But as the net tightened, the criminals became aware that their operation was compromised. Whispers of an informant, of a leak in their carefully constructed network, began to circulate. The Serpent was notoriously paranoid, and his response was swift and brutal. Threats escalated. Harrison's car tires were slashed, and a brick with a menacing note was thrown through his living room window. Finch himself felt the subtle shift in the air, the increased surveillance on his apartment, the lingering gazes from unknown vehicles. His operative instincts, long suppressed, roared to life. He wasn't just working with an ally. He was protecting one. His tactical skills were now put to the ultimate test, maintaining his carefully constructed cover while simultaneously safeguarding Harrison and subtly misdirecting the Serpent's desperate, retaliatory strikes. The game had just moved from strategy to survival. The air in Northwood High was thick with an almost unbearable tension. The whispers of an imminent expose, of a major criminal operation being unraveled, had spread like wildfire, adding a palpable layer of unease to the usual adolescent anxieties. It was the day of the Serpent's big play, a seemingly legitimate public forum disguised as a community investment initiative meeting where he intended to finalize a dubious deal with compromised local politicians and school board members, effectively cementing his control over aspects of the town's finances and resources, including, most disturbingly, future school development projects that could serve as perfect money laundering fronts. Arthur Finch, outwardly calm in his usual tweed jacket, felt the cold hum of adrenaline under his skin. He was a tightly coiled spring, his senses heightened, his mind running through a dozen contingencies. Harrison, pale and visibly trembling, but resolute, sat beside him in the small auditorium. A reluctant pawn turned crucial ally. Federal agents, disguised as ordinary citizens, mingled subtly in the crowd, their eyes scanning for any sign of trouble, their presence a silent, lethal promise of justice. Kevin, Brenda, and Marcus were also present, sitting together in the middle rows, still oblivious to the full extent of the trap. They projected their usual air of arrogant superiority, unaware that their world was about to come crashing down. Brenda even shot Finch a contemptuous glare, probably still relishing the memory of the assembly humiliation. Finch met her gaze, his expression unreadable, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. She thought she was still the one with power. She had no idea. The criminal leader, a slick, corpulent man named Victor, the Serpent Moretti, strode confidently onto the makeshift stage. He radiated an almost reptilian charm, his voice smooth as he began to drone on about community growth and sustainable development. using corporate jargon to mask his predatory intent. He pulled out charts and graphs, pointing to projected revenues, all of it a carefully constructed facade of legitimacy. He spoke of new school facilities, of lucrative contracts, of a bright future for Northwood, carefully weaving his insidious plans into the fabric of civic progress. Just as Moretti was about to sign the final, damning document, sealing the fate of Northwood for his personal gain, Finch made his move. He didn't rise from his seat. He didn't shout. He simply, subtly, triggered a concealed device in his pocket. Simultaneously, from a discreet location at the back of the auditorium, a powerful, miniaturized projector, previously hidden by an agent, sprang to life. It didn't project Moretti's carefully crafted charts. Instead, it overlaid them with a series of stark, irrefutable images directly onto the main screen behind stage. The first image was a high-resolution photograph of the Serpent's real, hidden financial ledger, clearly showing massive, unexplained cash flows from school funds to offshore accounts. The next image flashed, showing Kevin's frantic texts about collections and muscle for overdue gambling debts. Then, a chilling screenshot of Brenda's social media messages, coldly identifying vulnerable students, their personal details exchanged with the Serpent's enforcers. And finally, a clear, unmistakable photograph of a signed contract, detailing the forced sale of a widowed teacher's property to a shell corporation owned by Moretti, at a fraction of its value, after her son fell into gambling debt. Chaos erupted. A collective gasp, then a roar of outrage swept through the hall. Moretti, caught mid-sentence, spun around, his face contorted in a mask of shocked fury. His carefully constructed facade shattered, revealing the predatory monster beneath. He started to bluster, to deny, to threaten, his voice cracking with desperation. "These are lies. Fabrications. Get that off the screen." But it was too late. The truth, stark and undeniable, was exposed for all to see. In the ensuing pandemonium, the federal agents moved. With practiced efficiency, they converged on Moretti and his key associates, who had been strategically identified and located within a crowd. "Victor Moretti, you are under arrest," an FBI agent's voice boomed, cutting through the noise. "You and your co-conspirators are being charged with racketeering, financial fraud, coercion, and endangerment of minors." Moretti screamed, resisting, but he was quickly subdued. His powerful bodyguards, who had been sitting calmly among the attendees, were also swiftly apprehended by other agents. Kevin, Brenda, and Marcus watched in stunned horror. Their faces, moments before filled with arrogance, were now pale with disbelief and dawning terror. The world they had so confidently manipulated was collapsing around them, and their meek English teacher was at the center of its implosion. The power dynamics had not merely shifted, they had been utterly reversed, leaving the predators caught in their own web. The auditorium erupted into a cacophony of gasps, shouts, and the insistent clicks of reporters' cameras. The arrests of Victor, the Serpent, Moretti, and his associates sent shockwaves through the community. The swift, decisive action of the federal agents left no room for doubt or denial. Moretti, his face contorted in a mask of impotent rage, was led away in handcuffs, his empire of lies and intimidation crumbling with every step. His bluster had given way to a panicked, terrified silence. The revelation of his criminal network, using the school as a front to prey on vulnerable families, ripped through the community, turning the initial murmurs of confusion into a roar of indignant outrage. Principal Harrison, though still trembling, managed a small, almost imperceptible nod of thanks to Finch as the agents led Moretti away. His cooperation, though born of fear, had saved him from complete ruin, and he would likely receive a plea deal, his career effectively over, but his freedom intact. A deeply humbled man. The bullies, Kevin, Brenda, and Marcus, were caught in the immediate, devastating fallout. Their faces, once so smug, were now etched with pure, unadulterated terror. Federal agents moved toward Kevin and Brenda, who were trying to melt into the chaotic crowd. Kevin's gambling debts, and his explicit role as a runner for the Serpent were now part of public record, undeniable evidence of his criminal activities. He was apprehended, his protests weak, his sports scholarship and his future as a golden boy dissolving before his very eyes. Brenda, equally defiant initially, quickly crumpled. Her meticulous digital footprint, her precise targeting of vulnerable students for Moretti's loan shark operation, was laid bare. Her wealthy father, whose connections had protected her for so long, would now face intense scrutiny and potential legal ramifications for his own ties to Moretti's network. She too was led away, her manipulation finally yielding its bitter harvest. Marcus, however, was treated differently. While he had participated in the bullying, his deep-seated fear of Kevin and the pervasive atmosphere of intimidation in his home life were quickly uncovered by the agents as part of the broader investigation. Recognizing him as a victim coerced into complicity rather than a malicious mastermind, he was not immediately arrested. Instead, he was taken into protective custody, offered counseling and a chance at rehabilitation. His bullying days were over, replaced by a path toward healing and accountability, albeit under strict supervision. The school community reacted with a mixture of shock, relief, and profound gratitude. The full extent of the corruption, the insidious way it had permeated their lives, was now horrifyingly clear. The students, once fearful, now felt a collective sense of liberation. Finch, who had quietly observed and acted, remained humble, deflecting praise. When approached by reporters, he spoke simply of witnessing a wrong and feeling compelled to act, drawing on his life experiences to identify the patterns of exploitation. He never revealed his true identity, nor did the federal authorities, who understood the critical importance of protecting his cover. He was simply Mr. Finch, the English teacher who had seen what others refused to see, and had acted with quiet, unwavering courage. Sarah, the observant student, sought him out after the arrests. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of awe and respect, met his. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice barely a whisper, I knew there was something different about you. Thank you. You saved us. You saved Northwood." He offered her a small, genuine smile. "I just did what needed to be done, Sarah. It takes courage to speak truth to power. You showed that courage, too, by seeing what was happening and not looking away." The school, stripped of its layers of corruption, began a painful but necessary process of healing and reform. Mr. Harrison, true to Finch's word, was given a plea deal and resigned, replaced by a new principal, a woman of unwavering integrity who immediately began to implement policies designed to protect students and restore trust. The atmosphere shifted palpably. The fear dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism, a sense of community reclaiming itself. Finch, still somewhat enigmatic, became a respected figure, a quiet cornerstone in the revitalized school, a sentinel of justice. In the weeks and months that followed the dramatic arrests, Northwood High underwent a profound transformation. The palpable tension that had hung over the classrooms for so long evaporated, replaced by an atmosphere of cautious optimism and genuine learning. The dark shadow of corruption lifted, allowing the true spirit of the school to emerge from the pervasive gloom. A new principal, Ms. Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her unwavering ethical compass and proactive leadership, replaced Mr. Harrison. She immediately implemented stringent financial audits, bolstered student support services, and fostered an open-door policy that encouraged students and staff to speak out against injustice. The fear of retaliation that had paralyzed so many was slowly replaced by a sense of trust and empowerment. Arthur Finch continued to teach English, now genuinely respected by every student and faculty member. His classroom, once a battleground of wills, became a sanctuary of intellectual curiosity. Students engaged, asked questions, and felt safe to express themselves. Finch, still quiet and unassuming, possessed an undeniable presence, a quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. He was no longer just a teacher. He was a guardian, a symbol of the justice that had been won. He found the peace he had sought for so long. The predictability of the school routine, the honest engagement with young minds, offered him a solace he hadn't known since his covert life had ended. The Bullies, once the self-proclaimed rulers of Northwood, faced their well-deserved consequences. Kevin, his criminal ties and gambling activities exposed, was not only expelled but faced legal repercussions that saw him serving community service and attending a strict rehabilitation program. His golden boy image shattered. He was forced to confront the destructive path he had chosen. Brenda's digital manipulation and her family's entanglement with Moretti's enterprise led to a dramatic fall from grace. Her social media empire crumbled, her influence evaporating as her actions were revealed to the wider community. Her family faced intense legal scrutiny, and she learned, in the harshest way possible, that power derived from cruelty is ultimately hollow. Marcus, through a comprehensive rehabilitation program, was given a chance to break free from the cycle of violence that had defined his young life. His raw strength, once a tool for intimidation, was now channeled into constructive outlets, guided by counselors who recognized his potential for change. His path was long and arduous, but for the first time, he had a real opportunity for a future beyond the shadows. Finch sometimes caught fleeting glimpses of his former life. A news report about a major international crime ring being dismantled, a subtle reference in a confidential email from federal contact, a memory triggered by a particular scent or sound. But these were just echoes, fading whispers from a past he had chosen to leave behind. He no longer yearned for the high-stakes world of covert operations. His battle was here, in the quiet hallways of Northwood High, in the minds he helped shape, in the safety he helped secure. The transformation was complete. The traumatized operative, seeking anonymity and peace, had found something far more profound: redemption and purpose. He hadn't just saved his job. He had saved a school. He had saved lives, and in doing so, he had truly saved himself. The narrator's voice comes in, full of warmth and reflection. What is true strength? Is it the ability to dominate, to control, to instill fear? Or is it the quiet courage to stand against injustice, to use one's unique abilities not for personal gain, but for the protection of the innocent? Arthur Finch's story is a testament to the latter. He was a man with a hidden past, a master of the shadows, yet he found his greatest purpose in the bright, unforgiving light of a high school classroom. His journey reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes or carry guns. Sometimes they wear tweed jackets and carry textbooks, fighting battles for decency and justice in the most unexpected of places. And in their quiet actions, they remind us that the greatest power lies not in physical might, but in an unwavering commitment to truth and the profound, transformative courage to create a safe haven for all. His story is a powerful testament to the idea that even the most broken places can be healed and the most lost souls can find their way home, simply by choosing to stand for what is right.